everywhere you go, especially if you're a bimble like me, you'll find listed buildings, the grand stately homes, the old cottages or the ancient churches, or perhaps a train station like Deansgate Station, formerly Knott's Mill. But what about the small stuff, the strange stuff, the objets d'art, the curiously listed? Well, Stretford, just down the Bridgewater Canal, has loads of them. Let's bimble.
Things to show me, but life just keeps turning back to the way things were before. All new this time, you would still see all that became attached from the way things were before. It just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary life.
It's quite hard to find this, Bimblers, if you don't know what you're looking for. It's something called Brindley's Weir. It's a culvert basin or drain sump that takes the Cornbrook River underneath the Bridgewater Canal, and it was designed by James Brindley. The River Cornbrook starts out in Gorton in Manchester, and it goes about 750 metres before it's culverted. Most people in Manchester don't know that it exists. They think that Cornbrook is just a stop on the Metrolink. When it reaches here on the outskirts of Stretford, it needs to go under the Bridgewater Canal, and that's what this does. This big plug hole takes it under the canal and under something called Pomona Island, where it flows into the River Irwell, or the Manchester Ship Canal as it is at this point. It would have been built in 1759, or just before, and as I've said, it was designed by James Brindley, on behalf of Francis Egerton, the 3rd Duke of Bridgewater, hence the name of the canal. So there you go, a Grade 2 listed plug hole. Let's bimble.
Edged over lines, days keep moving, but time just keeps falling back to the way things were before. It just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. It just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives.
As if James Brindley wasn't enough, how about Edward Leader Williams and Trafford Road Swing Bridge? It was opened in 1894 to get the road over the Manchester Ship Canal, and Edward Leader Williams was the chief engineer of the Manchester Ship Canal. He designed all of the swing bridges and the high-level cantilever bridges at Latchford and Warburton. That's just had its toll increased from the 1894 price of 12 pence to the 2024 price of £1. Mr. Williams also designed the world's first and only swing aqueduct over at Barton, just a bit further down the canal near the Trafford Centre. He was the chief engineer of the Weaver Navigation and he co-designed the Anderton boat lift with a fella called Edwin Clark. He knew all about hydraulics, you see. You could do a lovely loop down here, down the Manchester Ship Canal, onto the Weaver Navigation, up the Anderton boat lift, onto the Trent and Mersey Canal, as designed by James Brindley, through the Preston Brook Tunnel, onto the Bridgewater Canal, both also designed by James Brindley, and back to Manchester. That's if you had a canal barge. The bridge wouldn't have always been painted red, but Man United play around here, at Old Trafford. But is it the right shade of red? It's supposed to be Diabolo red, isn't it, Manchester United? Or at least that's according to Alex Ferguson. It's supposed to differentiate Manchester United from Liverpool, who also play in red. But in 2022, the owners of Manchester United, the Glazers, apparently painted the stadium the wrong shade of red. Let's hope when Peel Holdings repaint this bridge, they'll paint it the right shade of red. As if Peel Holdings ever paint bridges. Let's bimble. Behind me is the Grade 2 listed Greco-Roman archway to something called White City. In 1827, a meeting was held at Manchester Town Hall between the Manchester Council and the Manchester Botanical and Horticultural Society. They both agreed that some green space needed to be allocated to the workers of Manchester. Manchester would have been thick with black smog from all the factories in the industry, and they thought that the people of Manchester needed a nice green space to go on a Sunday. This site was chosen by a scientist and clever clogs called John Dalton. He's the fellow that discovered atomic theory, and he said that here in Stretford would be the least polluted because of the prevailing winds blowing the black smog somewhere else. The land was donated by Thomas Joseph Trafford, the first Baronet of Trafford, and in 1831 they opened the Manchester Botanical Gardens. They took donations from all around the world, 40 different types of apple trees, pear trees, cherry trees, apricot trees, all housed in a great big conservatory called a Palm House. In 1907, the land was leased to a businessman called John Calvin Brown, and he set up a company called the White City Company, and he renamed the Botanical Gardens the White City Leisure Grounds. It eventually became a greyhound racing track, and in the 1980s it became a retail park, but they kept the big archway. Speaking of Grade 2 listed archways in Stretford, let's bimble.
You still won't figure it out. Figure it. With a simple frame of mind and a little time, protest all you like. We both know, with goodwill on your side and a little time, you can have just what you like. We both know things could be easy if you just try.
This is a 3-in-1 portage, this one, Bimblers. A triple Grade 2 curiously listed portage. Firstly, you have the archway that leads into Gorse Hill Park. That was apparently moved brick by brick from its original location, just over the way from the White City Arch. That would have been the entrance to the Old Trafford Hall. When they built the railway, they had to shift the archway, so they shifted it here to Gorse Hill Park. Gorse Hill Park would have been a dairy farm back then. In fact, most of Stretford would have been agricultural. It wasn't until the industry came, and the world's first dedicated industrial estate over in Trafford, that they stopped having farms and started having factories. The people of Manchester used to call Stretford Porkhampton because all the pig farms were here. This is where you got all your bacon from. And this would have been a farmer's field leading all the way to Old Trafford cricket ground. Just outside of the Grand Archway is the Great Stone, a Grade 2 listed glacial erratic which apparently rolled here at the end of the Ice Age. From miles away, could be Scotland, could be the Lake District, could be the Peak District, but it didn't start out its life here in Stretford. Not the right type of stone, you see. It would have stood to the side of the old Roman road going between Manchester and Chester, but in 1925 they widened this road behind me, so they had to shift it to outside Gorse Hill Park. During plague times they would have used it as a plague stone. The divots at the top would have been filled with vinegar, and that's where you put your money for the merchants to sell you food when you were infected with the plague. And thirdly, you have Stretford Cenotaph, or Stretford War Memorial. That's dedicated to the 580 men from Stretford that died in the First World War. Probably more men from Stretford died in the First World War than died of the plague. Let's bimble.
Like both know, with goodwill on your side and a little time, you can have just what you like. Both know it's easy if you just try. Better off this time. Have your own way you like. Easy if you just try. Easy if you just try. Better off this time. Have your own way you like. Easy if you just try.
I'm stood behind a building that Mrs. Bimble said she was going to buy for me. Longford Cinema here in Stretford. It was opened in 1936 by the Mayor of Stretford, and it was designed by a fella called Henry Elder. He was born in Pendleton in Salford, and he studied at the University of Manchester, studied architecture, and he made his bread and butter designing cinemas. He designed the Lyceum and the ABC cinemas in Glasgow, and the Bijou in Reddish, and a cinema called the Asoldo in Gorton. In 1950 they changed the name of the Longford Cinema to Asoldo. Must have been the company name. Did you know that Julie Andrews performed in here during the war? And when they bombed the Free Trade Hall in Manchester, the Halle Orchestra used to rehearse in here. Soundproofed, you see. All modern stuff in there. 2,000 heated seats it's got. We should do Bimblism live in there. I am actually bringing Bimblism live to Manchester on Sunday the 27th of October at the Britain's Protection, just round the corner from where we started today's Bimble at Deansgate Station. Starts at 4 o'clock. Under 18s welcome when accompanied by an adult, a responsible one if possible. Have I mentioned that before? This was a cinema right up until 1965 when it became a bingo hall, and it closed in 1995, 1 year after it was Grade 2 listed. Let's bimble. So we reach our final portage, Bimblers. The second oldest listed building in Stretford, or listed structure as it should be. The base of an old cross here in St Matthew's churchyard. It was apparently installed in medieval times, and it was to the side of that big Roman road between Chester and Manchester. But in 1863, it was moved into the churchyard of St Matthew's. Stretford actually gets its name from that old Roman road. Street Ford, street being the old Roman word for a big road, and ford being a crossing over a river, which I guess would be the River Irwell. The River Irwell became the Manchester Ship Canal in Stretford, and that's when the population of Stretford stopped being farmers and started being mill and factory workers. In fact, the population of Stretford increased by 40% between 1891 and 1901. There's been 3 St Matthew's churches on this site. The first chapel was built in 1413, then they enlarged it in 1718, and in 1841 they built this one behind me. But even more curious than the curiously listed base of a cross in the churchyard, St Matthew's Church isn't listed, just the base of said cross, all next to Stretford Precinct, which is where Nana from the royal family had a fall. It's still spoke about to this day.